Hello, everybody. Crypto Caesar. It's the 8th of October, 2022. And this video is going to be about building a case for a Bitcoin bottom. Is the Bitcoin bottom in? And this video really relates to the hodlers of Bitcoin, the ones who are accumulating Bitcoin at the lows. It's certainly not targeted at those who are trading leverage. Anyway, so let's get into it. A case for a Bitcoin bottom. So let's have a look at some indicators that might suggest to us that Bitcoin has bottomed or is at least forming a bottom. The first one is the RSI. You can see here in this slide the RSI moving up and down on the chart, and each red vertical line represents each low of Bitcoin in its history. So each Bitcoin bottom, as it were. So this one here on around about the 14th of November 2011 was the first halving low, which gave a reading of 34.78. Okay, the readings you can see here on the right. The first cycle low is here, which came in on Monday, the 12th of January, 2015 or thereabouts. And that gave a reading of 28.89 on the scale. Then we had the second cycle low, which was around about the 10th of December, 2018. And that gave us a reading of 29.33. Then we had this low, our next low, which could potentially be the third cycle low, but certainly it's the next cycle low or close to the cycle low. That was around about June of this year and gave a reading of 25.84. Now that is quite significant really, because that is the lowest reading, RSI reading in Bitcoin's history. It really is really, really low, and therefore suggests to us that at that point in June of 22 this year, Bitcoin was in the extremity or in extreme area of oversold conditions. So it was quite extreme at that point. So that is significant. But what we always have to remember is this, particularly when we're trading, is that RSIs can remain oversold or indeed overbought for longer than a trader can remain solvent. Okay, so remember that. All right, but generally speaking, this reading here is significant because these are extreme oversold conditions. It is the lowest RSI in Bitcoin's history, so that is something significant that we can't or cannot ignore. So let's have a look at the next slide. The next slide is the MACD. Now, the best way to look at the MACD when you're looking on a logarithmic scale over a longer period of time is to use the logarithmic MACD, not the linear MACD. So it's on TradingView, it's LMACD. Again, the vertical red lines here basically indicate to you where the last Bitcoin bottoms were. So the first cycle bottom around January 2015 was here. The second cycle bottom around 10th of December 2018 was here. And then this last low down in June of 22 was here. Now, what's very clear about these lows is that the MACD lines are, they're almost in exactly the same position when Bitcoin makes this bottom. So January, it was the lines were in this position. Then in December, they were in this position. Again, very, very similar. And again here in June of 22, very, very similar. And I've marked them out for you on the chart here. And what is clear is that when you're looking at a MACD, you want to see bearish momentum waning. And you can see, let's look at the first cycle bottom. You can see that bearish momentum started to wane the MACD lines crossed, and then it went. And that was the point of which the bottom was in, and then, it started rallying out of that bottom territory. Again, in 2018, they came down, they were pointing downwards, then they postured upwards, crossed, bearish momentum had waned. Of course, this is a lagging indicator, you've got to remember that. And then it moved out of its bottom. Now, what's clear here in June of 22, the lines were in that posturing downward momentum, which is correct for that because, there was a strong bearish downtrend. However, now there is this possibility of them crossing, and it's quite clear the bearish momentum is waning. It is waning. So if these cross and posture to the upside, then that would be a good indication that potentially the bottom is in. But of course, what one has to remember is this is a lagging indicator. You're not going to know this is happening until it's already happened, okay, until some weeks afterwards. But what's quite clear from this is that the symmetry is very, very similar. And certainly the bearish momentum seems to be waning, and structurally on this chart looks very, very similar. So again, this is, I would say, bullish. This is definitely a case for the bulls, indeed, as the RSI is. Next slide is, very, very basic stuff here. Looking at the fear and greed index of Bitcoin, one always has to consider the psychology of the market, because markets basically work on psychology, don't they? Very, very clearly. And psychology is important in markets. And what is absolutely clear is that we have been in extreme fear with Bitcoin for a significant period of time now, for months, okay? We've either been in extreme fear or fear. And you can see now we're in extreme fear. Yesterday was extreme fear. Last week is extreme fear. And last month was fear. This has been going on for months and months and months. And what fear brings really in a market is opportunity, okay? So when one looks at something like this and sees these extreme readings of extreme fear, it's always a good opportunity really to start thinking about maybe building a position in that asset, that security, commodity, or whatever it may be. Of course, we're talking about Bitcoin today. So certainly this would certainly be an indicator to us that this is a point of which we should be accumulating the asset, not distributing it, so buying it rather than selling it. So this is really quite a bullish signal. The next slide is the structure. Let's look at the structure. Let's look at the structure of the last bear market, okay? You can see that this is back in 2018. We came down and we just sat on 6K for a significant period of time. And then we broke down into the 3K range. A lot of people thought back in 2018 that this was the bottom, myself included. I was probably about 50 or 60% allocated to Bitcoin at this point. There was quite a strong case for this being the bottom, but it puked or nuked further down into the 3K range, but that was okay for us because we still had cash on the side and that we continued to accumulate there. But when looking at these structures, they're undeniably similar, aren't they? I mean, back in 2018, Bitcoin had this support area, and then it just broke down and came down and found this bottom area. Very similar here, although the support wasn't very long, but there was this support line here for a significant period of time. But then it broke down and came down. But what's interesting is firstly, the structures are very, very similar, aren't they? These are undeniably similar. And indeed, the percentage downside candles from the point of the break of support are very similar as well. I mean, back in 2018, it was a 46% downside move, okay, from the break of support. And in this year, in 2022, it was a 43.7% move at the point of which Bitcoin broke that important support area. So very, very similar in percentage downside, very, very similar in the way they look in structure. But I suppose there is also a similar case to say that this structure here that we were, experiencing back in 2018 is similar to this structure here. So there could be one more leg down. Okay, but we'll come on to that in a moment. But certainly, from a structural point of view, that they are undeniably similar. And I think that that's something that we've got to take on board. So let's have a look at some on-chain stuff. So this is the net unrealized profit and loss of Bitcoin. I'm always hesitant really to use on-chain indicators, but I like them sometimes, and it's good to throw them into the mix anyway when you're looking from a technical point of view at anything in crypto. So the net unrealized profit and loss has historically been pretty good at gauging tops and bottoms. And as you can see, because we've got the fear and greed index overlaid, this was the first Bitcoin cycle top here. In fact, it went into complete euphoria twice. Okay, so that was a great indication there that, right, you've got to sell. Okay, again, back in 2018, it tipped into it, a very good indication there to sell. And back in sort of April, May time of 2021, that again was a very good indication there that potentially we were topping out, because it really was just very, very close to going into that peak of euphoria. But equally, this indicator is a very good indicator as to when you should be buying rather than selling, or accumulating rather than distributing. This was the first, not the first cycle low, but the first Bitcoin bottom. Then we have this cycle low here again, into these extreme areas. Again, the bottom in 2018 gauged that. And essentially what it's doing, once it goes into these extreme areas, it turns red. Okay, it means capitulation. And when it gets into that capitulation area, that is certainly a point of which you should start thinking to yourself as an investor, and certainly as a long-term hodler of Bitcoin. Okay, now is a time for me to start taking notice. And now is the time for me to start potentially, deploying capital to start accumulating Bitcoin. And what is clear is that we have been in this red territory for some time now. I mean, arguably, some people might say, well, we need more capitulation, and I'll come on to that in a moment. But, certainly this is not a sign that you should be selling Bitcoin, in my view. This is a sign that you should be certainly considering deploying some capital into Bitcoin, or waiting for a little while longer and seeing what happens, but certainly having your eyes firmly on the charts and waiting for that moment to pounce. So this is a sort of a slightly bullish indicator here, I would say, although there are arguments both ways on it, but certainly it's telling us, this indicator, that this is a time for accumulation rather than distribution. Okay, now another on-chain indicator which is quite good at gauging tops and bottoms is the pure multiple, which is basically calculated by dividing the daily issuance value of Bitcoin in US dollars by the 365-day moving average. Go on to Glassnode, tell you a little bit more about it. But essentially, again, this has been very good at gauging tops, okay, and bottoms. Didn't quite get into that red zone of euphoria on the chart last time, but very, very close, but certainly very good at gauging these bottoms. And here we are, this was the bottom in 2015, the bottom in 2018, 19. And again, here we are in this area. So, this indicator is telling me, or should be telling the viewer of the indicator, that this is, again, a point of which you should start to take notice of this asset, because if you really believe in this asset, then, this might be a good time to start accumulating it.
Welcome to Prime XBT, the most powerful trading platform, offering immediate access to more than 30 assets. Trade cryptocurrencies, forex, stock indices, and much more.
Okay, let's have a look at the next slide. The next slide is the percentage downsides in the cycles of Bitcoin. Now you'll see from the chart here, this was the 2015 bottom, this was the 2018 bottom, and here we are now in 2022. And what's very, very clear from historically from Bitcoin's perspective is that it has generally puked or nuked about 84% from the highs. So it was 84% from the highs in 2015 and 84% from the highs in 2018. 84% from the highs here would take us to around about 11.2K or so. We're not far from that. And this sort of percentage downside argument also flows into the structure argument, the opposite to the structure argument, that we've got one more leg down. So one more leg down would take us down into that 11K mark. Are we going to get there? I don't know. But, this certainly is an argument that some bears would say, well, no, we've still got another leg down. Plus, look at the state of the economy. Look at the state of risk assets. Bitcoin's being treated as a risk-on asset at the moment. Therefore, the probability is it's more likely than not that we've got a little bit more downside. So, take it as you will, but, traditionally Bitcoin pukes about 84%. And so far we've only puked about 74%. So in relative terms, from the all-time high, we've only got another 10% to go. Okay, this slide is looking at the 4-year cycle, and if you're in my group or you follow me on Twitter or you follow me on YouTube, that I am a cycles person. I like cycles. Cycles form in everything in life. Everything has a cycle, right? So, and that's true to most assets, particularly commodities. Bitcoin in particular has a cycle in my view, and there's a very, very strong argument that Bitcoin cycles in 4-year cycles, 4-year cycles from peak to peak, 4-year cycles from bottom to bottom. And you can see in this chart here, the first three vertical lines represent the halving. So this is the first halving around approximately November 2012. Second halving here, July 16, then the halving in the last halving we had in May 2020, and the next scheduled halving is around about March 2024. And what you can do, the best way to do this is use either the Bitstamp chart or the BLX chart, the Brave New Liquid Coin Index chart for Bitcoin, and just map it out in the weekly chart, the monthly chart. It's pretty straightforward. Essentially, this was the first peak of Bitcoin rallying out of the halving. And from that peak to the next peak out of the next halving was 208 bars, which is exactly, so each bar is 1 week, obviously, because it's a weekly chart. So 208 bars or weeks is exactly 4 years. So from peak to peak was 4 years. The first bottom Bitcoin had from its first cycle out of the halving was here. And the next bottom, of course, was here. And measured again, bottom to bottom, this was 205 bars, which is just shy a few weeks of 4 years. Again, the peak we had in 2017, in 2017-18 was here, and then the next peak we had, the cycle just gone, obviously here, and that was 205 bars, so just shy a few weeks of 4 years. So if Bitcoin continues to work in these 4-year cycles, which there's no suggestion at the moment that it's broken this cycle, we would have to, of course, measure from the last bottom back in 2018, 19, 205 bars or so, or 205 bars would take us to the 14th of November. 208 bars, I think, takes us to around about the 6th or at the beginning of December. there is a strong case here. If you're a Bitcoin cycle trader, then the 4-year cycle low is not in yet, and potentially we either have another leg down or a little bit more sideways into Q4, and then Bitcoin will find its bottom and will start to trend upwards. But essentially, for me, it's just a time of being patient, because we can't, there's no way that you can say to anyone, I know exactly when the Bitcoin bottom is going to be, because that's just utter rubbish and nonsense. And if you get it right, you're just literally, it's by huge luck that you get that right. So the best way to look at a cycle is to basically form a cycle window for Bitcoin. And my cycle window is quite big, and I think the bigger the window, the better. Obviously, it can't be too big. But I think what an appropriate and reasonable window would be 1 financial quarter, which is obviously 3 months. Now, the financial quarter this year has now just opened on the 1st of October. So that gives us a window from October, November, December. And that is the window that I am looking for from a 4-year cycle standpoint for the Bitcoin bottom. So anywhere between October through to end of December, very, very early January. And of course, Bitcoin can find its bottom and then go sideways for 3 or 4 months, just like it did here, because these are their areas of accumulation. So if Bitcoin does puke, say, in the end of December, then you're looking at another 3 or 4 months of sideways action or accumulation action before it then finds its way out of the bottom. But anyway, if I had a gun to my head, I mean, as I said earlier, cycles can come early or cycles can come late. If we go 205 bars, then that's the 14th of November. If we go 208 bars or 208 weeks, which is 4 years exactly, that takes us to the beginning of December. But if I had a gun to my head, I would probably say that the 4-year cycle low will come in November time, or potentially December. So yeah, Bitcoin moves in 4-year cycles. There's no evidence to me to suggest that this 4-year cycle is broken. It's a very, very cyclical asset. And it's made more so cyclical, in my view, by the Bitcoin halvings. Cycle lows can come early or late. Highs and lows can come early or late. So it's best to pick a window. And for me, that's a financial quarter. And therefore, we will probably be looking at November, December time. So here's a bit more of a zoomed in view of the 4-year cycle. So you can see here the cycles from low to low, okay, and low to low. So bringing us in potentially for the 4-year cycle low come November, December. What's interesting when you look at this chart is we have to look at the bearish downtrend, the time of which Bitcoin has spent trending downwards in a bear market. For this one, we can see this was coming out of the first cycle, 59 bars. So it spent 59 weeks in a bearish downtrend. So 59 weeks of pain. The next one was 51 weeks of bearish downtrend before it found its bottom, and then it started to think about trending upwards. And at the moment, we've only been 30 weeks into a bearish, the bottom would have been only 30 weeks into a bearish downtrend. So, there's a significant argument here that we've only spent 30 weeks in this bearish downtrend to the bottom, and now we're finding our way up. I just don't think that's enough time. Okay, I think that we need to spend a few more weeks. There needs to be at least 50 plus weeks of this bearish downtrend. So potentially we've got a little bit more time to go, a little bit more pain to go before we find this final bottom. Let's have a look at where this bottom might be just quickly. For me, I have a big range, and the range is essentially between sub 20K all the way down to about 11 or so K. I will continue to accumulate in this range. Okay, if Bitcoin moves into this range quickly and then out of it, that's okay, because right now I'm 50% allocated to Bitcoin because I've been accumulating sub 20K, and I'm now 50% allocated to Bitcoin, and I'm waiting for some opportunities because I think it's going to go a little bit lower, and I will just then continue to accumulate into this range low. And obviously the deeper it goes, the more I shall accumulate. If it pukes past this range, then I'm okay with that, because I've been in Bitcoin a long time. I believe in Bitcoin, and I know that eventually it's going to continue to trend to the upside. So I'm all right with that, but I don't think it really is going to puke below 11K, but I could be wrong. And if it does puke below that, then that I'm going to have to take the pain on that. But at the end of the day, history has told us that if you accumulate in these extreme oversold conditions, you will be rewarded in the end. So let's have a look at continuation, or confirmation rather, of a low. So the first thing you've got to remember is that no one is going to be able to gauge a bottom perfectly. Bottoms are very hard to gauge. And if someone perfectly gets it on the nose, the chances is that it was just a bit of luck, okay? And the best way to deal with bottoms is just to, once an asset becomes extremely oversold, and the fear is in the market, that is the time to start accumulating an asset, in my view. Now, the only way you could really tell that Bitcoin has bottomed is by looking for a confirmation, a full confirmation of a break in the bearish structure, okay? And the complete confirmation for that here with Bitcoin is basically breaking above this area here of about 29-30K, because as soon as it breaks above this area here, we have now got confirmation of a break in bearish structure, a break in this really ugly downward spiral for Bitcoin. But that's a long way up from here, isn't it? So a lot of people will say to me, well, why should I wait until 29K to start allocating? Well, the answer to that is that you just have to start, you have to find a range, and you have to start accumulating in that range and hope that you get it right in that range, because you can't wait until 29K, because therefore you've lost a lot of potential upside there. But this is why I am currently 50% allocated to Bitcoin and essentially waiting for opportunities for Bitcoin. Because if Bitcoin breaks away from me and then leaves me with my pants down, and I have no allocation to Bitcoin, then I'm going to be chasing the market, and chasing a market is the worst thing for any trader or indeed investor. Causes all sorts of issues. So that's the reason why now I've been allocating slowly to a good, strong position in Bitcoin. So I'm 50% allocated. That's all sub 20K. Okay. And if the market now runs away from me, I'm all right with that. Okay. I can deal with that because I've already got a strong position. But the full confirmation would be a break and a hold above the 29K range. But there are little other confirmations along the way, and they would be firstly breaking the bull market support band, which runs along here, the yellow line that runs through here, the 20 and the 21. And that is around about the 24K mark. It might come down a little bit more as we move on because it's two moving averages, but it's around about 23, 24K. So that would be the first partial confirmation for me. The second partial confirmation would be, for me, would be breaking this area here, which is about 26K. And then that would be a partial confirmation. Then full confirmation would be in the range of about 29K. So, if you're an investor and you're 50% allocated like me, you might be looking at these partial confirmations to start potentially adding a little bit more as it moves up. But let's see what happens. If we've got more downside to come, I very much doubt we're going to break 26K, 24K. I think that would be unlikely. So let's see what happens. Okay, so the conclusion really is that there are both bullish and bearish cases for Bitcoin. And that is why I'm essentially 50-50 allocated. But there is the 4-year cycle, and that has a little bit more to go, which suggests to me that there could be some more either sideways or potential, decent downside for Bitcoin, which will be an opportunity. And of course, as I said earlier, unfortunately, at the moment, even though Bitcoin wasn't designed as a risk-on asset, quite the opposite, really, but Bitcoin is being treated as a risk-on asset at the moment. And as long as Bitcoin is treated as a risk-on asset, then it will be affected by the S&P 500, for example, in traditional markets. So if the S&P 500 continues to puke, then unfortunately it's going to bring Bitcoin down with it. And therefore, there is more potential downside on that basis. So this really is the reason why I'm 50% allocated to Bitcoin and 50% in US dollars, and looking for opportunities on the downside. Because as I say, if it pukes to the downside, I'm great with that's an opportunity for me. Excellent. I will continue to allocate Bitcoin and Ethereum at those lows. I'll do another video on Ethereum. But if it runs away from me, that's fine with me as well. But I just think on balance that there is more, it's more likely than not that Bitcoin has some more downside to go, or at least sideways. I think, potentially more downside rather than sideways. But as I said, more likely than not, more probable than not, that there is some more downside. But there is a good bullish case and indeed a good bearish case. So right now, we're in a bear market. This is a bear market. Anyone who's telling you this is a correction in a bull market is just nonsense. This is a bear market. We are 74% down from the lows. Excuse me. This is a bear market. It's clear it's a bear market. We've been trending downwards for weeks and weeks and months and months. Okay, but bear markets are great. Why are bear markets great? Because bear markets bring opportunity. And they bring massive opportunity to the normal person, because in crypto the upside potential is huge, and it's a lot more stronger than you would find in any other traditional market. So right now is just about being patient, keeping your head down, learning, educating yourself, accumulating, and waiting. And if you've got that ability to be patient and wait and have, a time horizon which is longer than 5 minutes, then you will be rewarded. I am sure of that. I've been in Bitcoin since 2016, and I've had some terrible times. We've had our ups, we've had our downs. I've been told Bitcoin's going to zero, if more than I can remember, but it always came out good in the end. Okay. And I'm a firm believer in Bitcoin. I'm a firm believer that Bitcoin is real hard money. And of course, there is a lot of opportunity, not just with Bitcoin, but with other assets. And I'll do another video on that later. But essentially, right now, it's about being patient, keeping your head down, educating yourself as much as you can, accumulating, and just waiting for that change in direction.